So I do want to thank Natalie Plecity and Fred Bonci for coming out this evening. Natalie is now she's a consulting landscape architect, but she had worked with Fred for 10 years leading up to this project, and now has taken a little time off for family and is working as a consulting landscape architect. She has a degree from Purdue University and has worked on a variety of projects, including MIT's Stata Center, Pack Square Park in Asheville, North Carolina, and the Walled Garden here in our Pittsburgh's Mellon Park. And then Fred Bonci is the founding principal of LaQuatra Bonci Associates in Pittsburgh. He's done a number of projects that include urban parks, park master plans, green initiatives, ecological framework studies, riverfronts, urban neighborhoods, and so a lot of town planning and very site-specific projects, and obviously ours is a very site-specific project. He's currently a member of the American Society of Landscape Architects, the Urban Land Institute, and the Congress for the New Urbanism. He's a board member of the Community Design Center in Pittsburgh, and a charter member of the Pittsburgh Parks Initiative Committee. So please welcome Natalie Plecity and Fred Bonci. I did
Thank you. I'll orient you to this in a minute, but we want to thank you all for coming out tonight. Beautiful night to actually do a nice Stroll garden. Let's keep this interactive. If you have any questions at all as we go through the garden, let us know and we'll try to answer them. I will tell you we are not native plant experts. It's an evolving industry. We have been doing this more and more in our practice over the last 10 years. And it's sort of now something that we strive to do on every project. And we still have an issue with clients buying into it and concern of what native plant materials are all about. And more so than anything, the aesthetic. It's so different than what we're used to. We're having problem solving. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we approach the design of the Westmoreland. And it started very early on after the visioning process where with Judy and with her architectural committee, we went to visit other museums and saw what they were doing, both in building and gallery, but also site and landscape design as well. And we went to places like the Highlands and other places that brought models of people that were looking at landscape differently. And it became sort of the idea behind what we really wanted to accomplish here was a very artistic landscape, but done in a native plant setting. So the other thing that we looked at is the reality of trying to do everything in native plants. Because when you're trying to transition an aesthetic, the idea of 100% native doesn't always work in terms of infrastructure, in terms of people's idea of what cultivated landscape or design landscape should look like. So we played games with how we selected it. What we tried to do was also more about
Could you speak up, please?
I'm sorry. I'm trying to talk about it.
I know, this is
run out
too
motorcycle. But anyway, we tried to look at natives that truly were Western Pennsylvania and work with local nursery suppliers to help us select those. So it was an iterative process between design, what we were able to get, and all of these plants are not like a nursery where you go buy them in a nursery. They were all contract grown. So we had to make our decisions for plant materials very, very early on so nurseries could grow them for us in the quantities we wanted to. Now the native plant industry is catching up to that demand, but it's still going to take a couple of years before they can do that. So the north side, which is obviously a piece of the building that was always street, because always seen because it was the closest adjacent to the street, more of the feel of its historic architecture, which was left. You know, the other side really was redone into a more contemporary approach. So this side was really more about geometry and opening up the idea of landscape to this particular centerpiece of the building. And since we had the blank walls of trying to figure out a transitional or filtered landscape that would use the walls as a background. So we have the Wasca trees on either side, which is a formal garden approach, a French garden approach, if you will, or English. And then we have these little seating areas by pathways interlaced with them. And I'll let Natalie again talk about the landscape plant materials, but we also had big trees we needed to save. One we were able to, one we were not able to. So this is what we call the formal side. The other side, although it's structured with geometric pathways, the planting gets much more naturalistic and has a much more organic flavor. You want to talk about the plants?
Yeah, I can talk about the plants on this side. This side is shady and it's somewhat serene. The trees above you, and it's kind of the quieter side. The parking lot's over there, and I think the plants kind of respond to that. We have these prostrate that are on the left side. It's not like your typical yew hedge. This is one that I've only heard of in the last few years. It grows kind of low and floppy, but it still has all the wonderful qualities of yews, though people seem to despise them these days. But it's evergreen. It's got a natural form. I don't think you could trim it into a cube if you tried. So those will eventually fill in. Next is a nice coral bell. It's a native coral bell, Dale strain. It should stay pretty nice through the winter. Coral bells tend to look good in the winter. And then we've moved on to Pachysandra, which, as everybody knows, probably is not native, but sometimes you need a good evergreen ground cover, and that is one of the hardest things to find in a native palette. So occasionally, as Fred mentioned, we do have to stray from natives as much as we try not to. I forgot the building side, also not native, are some holly hedges, which that's another thing. Sometimes you need a good holly hedge and there's just not a substitute for it. It has those great red berries and those lustrous leaves. So this side is pretty calm. It's very green. It won't look very different in the winter than it does now, which is very different from the other side, which we will see.
So will the coral bells stay green all through the winter?
They should stay fairly green. If it gets really cold and harsh, they can suffer a bit, but we're hoping they look good. That's our
So this is what we were talking about. One of the balances that we try to achieve is somewhere between a 15 and 20% ornamental palette, and trying to get 85 to 75. Okay, then we have 75. But the ideal thing is to go somewhere around 85% native, 15% on this. We want a little bit more because of the quality of landscape that we wanted to deliver on a different side. So it gets more native as you move around the building.
Question.
Yeah.
When you were talking about holly, American holly is a native, but it's not a hybrid, but what's the term for it that's kind of a native, but then they do a cultivar,
That
yeah.
unfortunately is not even a cultivar. That's not the American holly. That's the Japanese.
Yeah. So a lot of the plants, even though like an American holly is native to
It gets big.
right, it gets big. Most of the shrubs are Asian or other types
I
of
see.
marbles that have been introduced in
How big does you get?
I don't get about 3 feet of the tallest, but they are very slow growing, so it'll be a while. And it's so fluffy.
It's pretty.
I love it. And I wish it were native.
And we'll talk about this when we get to the other side. The reason why we selected that plant is we don't want it flipped. One of the worst things that we want to do is have everything flipped in the bowl. So we really want things to be hand pruned and stay as native as they can. We could do the same with the bowl.
I'll tell you what I hate is the tiny big juniper. That makes me cringe when I see that stuff.
So has anybody heard, I'm going to forget the name of the book, I'll remember it as we move around the building. Well, that's a new one out there. There's a book out that came out and it really talks about how plants are habitats for birds and insects. And he goes through this whole scenario.
Doug Calamai's books.
Doug Cullen, which is a big new one that just came out.
Yeah.
Got his name, but I went to a seminar he had at Frick. He talks about an Asian, I forget whether it's a linden tree or whatever, beside a Native American tree on 2 driveways in a suburban yard. And he's very humorous. So he talks about that they did the tree count of how many caterpillars were on the native tree versus on the Asian ornamental. And it's like, it was like 100 were on the bottom foot all the way around the native tree. And there were 3 that were on the Asian tree, and they didn't even want to be there.
I think that
They accidentally landed there, and they were going to move any minute. But it really reinforces that one of the things about pollinator gardens and native gardens is the habitat they create. Even though we think of habitat sometimes as bigger animals or birds, but they really attract insects completely differently than the Asian and introduced species. So it's something to think about. But that's really detailed in that book. So any more questions here? Because we'll just move around.
Question for this chart.
Yeah.
So, how do you use this thing?
Okay, we'll
Okay,
explain.
so none of these were here. Everything in
No,
here
no,
is
this is only the garden on the north,
down
on the
south side, so not here for the north.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're actually working on a new, Natalie's been working with Barbara on doing a brochure that'll be spring, summer, and fall, winter, which is for the brochure, yeah.
Yeah, and we'll add, and
With
we'll,
the pictures of plants so you can walk around actually.
and we could add, right,
I know that is probably not very useful.
right.
Okay.
And we can add this side, but one of the things that and we'll explain why we put those sketches in there too, because one of the things that you really need to do is really look at things seasonally. And not only look at color, but you also need to look at texture, because we want this to have a winter texture to it. So Natalie did these diagrams to help us pick out plants. What patterns do we want? So it's a whole different way that when we plant. When you do it at the calling, you just start drawing circles down the line. When you're thinking of patterns, it's a whole different pattern. So these patterns are easy. It's coral bell, it's a Pakistani, it's cute. Over there it was, how is this going to look really lush and different and change?
And this feels very different, as you probably know from walking in. And some people will prefer that, and some people will probably rush here and calm down for all the while. So we've tried to create a spot for everything.
Okay, would you like to? Oh, these are hornbeam.
Probably get 20, 25.
They'll get 35. But we're going to lease it. We're going to do a box of red dye.
Oh, okay.
If you've ever been to the fruit market on Wall Street,
Yeah.
they have 2 sets of these hornbeam trees.
It's going to be a little.
Ours are going to be, yeah, we're not going to shear them. We're going to hand. So we're not going to shear anything.
Yeah, we have really noticed on the south side, lots of butterflies, golden finches, real finches love her, swirling around together in the air and stuff, so really entertaining for ourselves and visitors. Maybe they'll be a
Okay, let's walk around. So I'm going to let Natalie really talk about the plantings here, but one of the things I wanted to show you just on one of these diagrams is does anybody recall what the old site looked like?
Yes.
That there was a big hillside here and this was dead level on the top, and one of the things that we did was, move parking around so we could actually gain this green space to plant and make it usable, because the hillsides that were outside that parking area were not usable before. And the walkways were a gesture that takes you to the front door, but also organizes the landscape to give people many ways to filter through. Counter to that is another diagonal that organizes the plantings. So you could see these stripes. And the stripes represent different species of grass that we use to link all of the plantings inside of it together. So it's kind of like a meadow with an internal enrichment to it of perennials, if that makes sense. And we did the grasses to give us these very distinct striped patterns. And they alternate in different grasses to help organize everything. Because one of the things, some people will look at that and think it's total chaos. So you'll start seeing that. Actually, I'm really amazed at what we got coming up the first year of planting. This blew me away when we came out here and saw this, because usually it's struggling a little bit. We did lose some of the grasses, but they were just recently replanted. But one of the things that helped was the contract growers were able to get our plantings early enough that instead of doing a lot of smaller peat pots, which are normal to native plantings, which are the little 4-inch by 4-inch pots, we were able to get 1 gallon, if not 2 gallon plantings. And that was a huge difference on what this garden looks like the first year. So contract growing actually helped us in this case. So I'm going to let Natalie, and again, just looking at 2 of these, when you got to fall and you looked at the fall color, one of the things we did was introduce another ornamental, which is the yew that you can see at the corners, which we're hoping to trim in the perfect triangle to give us this winter effect at the anchors at the corners of the gardens. And it's really the only, I think, non-native oak here on this side. She's the plants lady. Okay. So anyway, I'll let her talk a little bit about the plantings here.
Since I'm trying to count, I'm missing the very bottom.
No, just look at it very vaguely, just glance at it.
Also that you know what you're missing here is this lower portion is woodland. So what we did was change this from a sun garden, and we're hoping that with the plantings of all the dogwood, serviceberry, and birch, this is going to be a transitionary woodland to help fight the fire. So that was studied separately, away from the sun perennial. If that makes sense. So that whole lower level, if you drew a line, none of that is on.
Well, we can mail them back to us when they're...
We'll mail it back.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit more about our process as far as the plants and why we chose what we did. If that's what, it seems like that's what everybody's interested in, learning a bit more about the plants. So there are 2 factors that I wanted to talk about that we used heavily in choosing what we did. First, and very important, I think, for any garden, is intelligent plant selection. There's a practical side to that and a more romantic side. And I'll start with the practical and get it out of the way, and then we'll talk about the romantic side. But practically, you need to know your sun requirements. Is it shady? Is it sunny? Of course, I'm sure you all know this. The moisture levels, your soils, and then what kind of maintenance you can have, what's available. So as far as this site, as we talked, the other side is very shady. This site is primarily full sun. We have no irrigation on this site, which is unusual for a garden this public and large. But something that is completely fine. Everyone thinks they need to irrigate everything. And what you need to do is choose a plant for your site. There's no irrigation, so we will choose plants that can handle this. And then you save a bunch of water and can still have a beautiful garden. And the other thing is that unless they've hired one since, the museum does not have a large maintenance staff. So we had to make something that was as low maintenance as possible. No maintenance, unfortunately, does not exist, but we tried to make it low and reasonable. That led us to natives naturally. We tend to do that anyway, but all of those requirements are really filled by natives. They tend to be drought tolerant and fairly low maintenance once they're established. But as Fred mentioned before, there's kind of a big debate about natives versus non-natives. Some people insist on using only natives, nothing else, no exceptions, and I think that is wonderful. We've had clients who want nothing other than Western Pennsylvania native plants, and we've done it, and it looks great. And then there are people who are still installing all these exotics with beds of mulch and that is not okay either. But we try to go somewhere in the middle. As Fred said, we try to do, I didn't know we tried to do 85%. We hit 75% on this project. All of the trees are native, and then 75% of the overall plants are native. But one other resource that we used is the Phipps Conservatory and Botanical Gardens website. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but every year they publish a top 10 sustainable plant list. And it is a wonderful resource. And they're not all native. They are all non-invasive. They are resistant to disease and pests. And once established, they require minimal watering and fertilizers. So I feel much better about using plants that are on that list if they're not native. If Phipps says it, it's got to be true. So 16 of the plants in this garden are from that list, including Russian sage, which is clearly not native, but it's so tough and durable and fits right in with all these other plants.
Natalie, we should mention too that part of this is also because we're a LEED certified building. So, and I don't know if you two know, we did just get it. It's silver, not gold, by a couple points. But so we wanted the grounds, in addition to the building, to be as sustainable as possible without additional resources. So that sort of fed into this a little bit too.
Yeah.
So we knew we couldn't have irrigation. And another good plant resource, by the way, is Ernst Seed out of Meadville, Pennsylvania. They publish a great catalog and actually do it by garden type or meadow type or perennial type. If you're looking for sun, wet soil, or dry soil. They grow a lot of things seed, but they're also starting to do a lot of plant growth themselves. We use them extensively. They're pretty good as well. So, and what's the one in the book I just gave you? North Creek or North Star. She just has a new book out that is pretty wonderful and talks about the whole idea of plantings like this. When you look at long-term sustainability of the garden, eventually you no longer have to mulch and spend money and a lot of things like that. So that's the kind of the effort that we put into it as well. Natalie said all the trees are native. These are black gums, the bigger ones. We were fortunate enough to be able to find some big 4-inch caliber ones. The rest are what we would call understory woodland trees, which are your dogwood, service berries, river birches, and redbuds, things like that. So do you want to talk about it? Do the two graphs.
Yeah, I was going to talk more about these color studies that we did, and sorry, I was pointing your packets. The seasonal studies, because I feel like that's the romantic side of plant selection. You know, you can pick a plant that's perfect for your sun and soil and water, and it can still look awful, and it can be ugly, but it fits all those requirements. So the other part of it is picking things that look beautiful in every season, that make people want to come back and have colors combinations that are lovely. So that's why we did those color studies, to ensure that we weren't missing a big gap of something that would remain too blah in some season. So I know you have the plant list, but I was going to run through the seasons real quick just to tell you, what you can expect or what you've already seen. In the spring, we have all the serviceberry blooms on the trees, the white blossoms. There's yellow wild indigo, purplish pink of the redbud, dogwood flowers, creeping phlox, which is the native variety, blue-eyed grass, and then we did put some bulbs in. There's just so long that you can wait through the winter and you have to see color, and it doesn't matter what it is, it has to be bulbs. Then comes summer, where the whole thing is going to just explode in color. We have a stilby, bee balm, coneflower, blazing star, all the salvias, which are still blooming, black-eyed Susan, Russian sage. A lot of them you can still see. And that's just a haven for pollinators. As you can still see them out here, the bees, the birds, the butterflies. Fall will turn very, very red. So come back soon and see it. A lot of the trees turn red, the maples. So serviceberry, chokeberry, corned bean, itea, black gum. These are all going to be, it's going to be very big. There's going to be a lot of kind of rusty oranges and browns with a little blue stem. And then the prairie dropseed has already these kind of brownish tops to it. And then we'll have a few pops of yellow from the birch and from some bottle brush buckeye that are, you can't see yet, they're on the other side of that wall. They're pretty small. And then that leads us to winter. And this is one point that I want to make that I find horrifying. You know, winter is one of the 4 seasons, and it should politely take up 3 months, just like all the other ones do. And instead, it really lasts from the end of November, when all the leaves fall, to April or really May, when you look at it and you wait for things to turn green, and that is 5 to 6 months of no green and winter. So that should require a lot of thought and planning. I think it's really depressing when people just mow down everything and you just wait for spring. And winter is depressing enough without adding your planting to it. So the things that we thought about here are these yew wedges that are Fred's invention. And they're not large enough to clip yet, but as soon as they grow a bit bigger, they'll be clipped, be a little bit more formal. So we have these yew wedges that are anchoring spots on this side. We have, the holly on the other side. We have some inkberries somewhere. They might be over there, maybe on the other side of the hill. That's a native evergreen. Pachysandra on the other side. And we have some Christmas fern around, which is also a native evergreen fern. Then, as we mentioned on the other side a little bit, we don't want them to cut anything down until late spring. We want all of this stuff to stay. It will turn brown, and the seed heads will turn black, as some of them are. And that creates wonderful interest and food and habitat for birds and wildlife through the winter. And I think it might have been Doug Tallamy that pointed out at that same lecture that he showed a picture of a cardinal on a black seed head or something, and he said, if that doesn't count for winter color, then I don't know what does. So I'm including that in my list. As far as structure, which Fred mentioned, that's why we have all these grasses and these heavy patterns and lines of them, so that they will keep some structure through the winter. And these are ones that we have chosen because they are supposed to be very sturdy. They're not supposed to flop. They can even handle snow, which is one of my favorite ones. I'm looking forward to seeing that. And then we have some red twig dogwoods that all look red, and then the hollyberries.
So the 2 major grasses are
Little blue stem
little blue stem.
and the cypress, grama. Those are our 2 major categories.
Those are both natives, and they have great winter form. So they can actually replace ornamental grasses.
And then we have some highlights of switchgrass and prairie dropseed and some tufted hairgrass, which is the really kind of beigey golden color you can see. Until I get inside. That's our next step.
You know what?
Yeah.
That's coming.
Barbara and
Barbara said I needed another thing to do.
maybe I should
Well,
just come to this.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's interesting for us on this is, Judy mentioned this to me a while ago when we were, she asked me a question about one of the plants, what this is going to look like. And I tried to explain to her, she said, well, this is my first time through it, and you do this all the time, and I said, no, we don't. Because you're the first client who actually had enough interest and enough, if you will, vision to say, this is what I want. And let's figure out how to get it done. We have not had another client who's taken the idea of doing a native garden in front of a major cultural institution to heart. So this is to their credit, and this is the largest one we've ever done. And it's going to be real interesting to watch it mature and grow, and I think it could be a great benchmark, because I don't think that there's other than the Frick Nature Center in Pittsburgh that we just completed, there's nothing that's this expensive, other than maybe at the Phipps Conservatory that has this degree of plant selection.
When do you cut that? like the
Early spring. I mean, right before you start seeing signs of green, or when you start seeing signs of green, but late
March.
February, early March. Yeah. Wait as long as you can, because once you cut it down,
Oh,
it's,
yes,
it's gone.
Do you just leave it to mulch in and compost in with the rest of the stuff?
No, I don't like
You clear it out?
for a garden like this.
Yeah.
but I'm sure they'll compost it someplace. It's not going to go into landfill.
Well,
I mean,
that's a good
so
lesson.
no, I mean, like,
We're gonna throw it over the railroad track.
no, you could. I mean, well, you could throw it right into the trees because it'll compost. Well, that's what I throw all my stuff in. Yeah, I don't put anything on the street.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's a learning experience.
I'm
here,
sorry.
too. We did a small yard in Squirrel Hill. That was our first native planting. And I did that. And she went through a host of people who most people don't know how to maintain native planting. So it's a learning science. We had a really good contractor. He's, I think, making it a huge attempt to learn how to maintain all of this. We've been helping him understand what needs to happen. But whether he's a long-term maintenance contractor or not, we're going to be working with the museum to make sure that whoever comes out here understands what they need to do.
And that was going to be my second point in how you know, smart plant selection is the first and very important. But then the second item that's almost as important is love. That if people fall in love with this garden, it's a fact that when people fall in love with gardens, they last forever. And long after we're all gone, someone else will love them, and they will be doing these same garden tours and taking care of it. They take care of gardens that they love. So if we can get people to fall in love with this garden, with all the seasons that will change and all the excitement that you'll see, that's our hope. Is that people will love it so much that they'll take care of it. Maybe we can start a garden. I wish I lived closer because I would.
We are gonna start a garden group, and the museum is interested in, we don't just see this as a setting for the building or for the museum. On the other hand, this is all brand new to us, but we're trying to figure out ways how we can program it. What sorts of things we can do. Our obvious thing is, do days when artists come and paint in plein air in the garden, but there are lots of other things that we can do, and we are working at doing some programming around the gardens, and we do love them. And in between visits from the subcontractor, we were out here weeding them. So we want to learn as much about them as we can.
Any other questions?
Oh, that is the Snow Hill Salvia, and that is a tremendous performer. It has looked like that since I came in the spring. And I don't. Have you guys been deadheading it, or is it just doing that on its own? And that's one of those plants that it's not native, but I just love salvia. That's another reason that sometimes if you love something and if you're going to take care of it, then it belongs in your garden, no matter what.
so you're going to have tours at the different seasons. So
We've been figuring it out. We're actually looking for somebody that has some expertise,
like the master gardeners.
exactly, to work with us. Yeah, to do some more public programming, and obviously we need to recruit some volunteers to help us with it in between, but we need somebody to lead them so that we don't do things that we shouldn't do to the plants.
I think that's what's interesting because I think most people, me included, so when you see them dying, I immediately. Well,
But they're not dying, they're just
lying
down
there.
a little bit.
But you know what? Yeah. That was on my list to do. Well, now I'm going to now enjoy them in the winter time.
It does
and not-
take a new perspective to look at things as not, that's what the majority of
So like with the butterfly bush that I would be going. So I should just leave that until next spring, like she wants.
You could leave it until March, or you could leave it until you can't take it. It's always a reason to, if it really bothers you, and there's a
Oh,
warm
it just
winter
kind of,
day.
you know, just falls over. But the people that cut the grasses in the autumn, I think, miss out on the snow. And the way the snow looks on some of these plantings, like you were saying, you know, even the flowers that have gone dark brown and even
A
black.
little bit of snow.
Yeah, and their texture and everything else in the wintertime.
Did you send us the photograph when it was that frosty morning?
I did.
So already we've had an incident where one morning coming to hear a picture of the deadheaded coneflowers with frost on it, or mist, whatever it was.
It was misty.
And that's the quality that you miss when you cut them down, because it can be really, really stunning and beautiful in the morning sunlight. So that's the kind of thing we're hoping to get there. A little bit different experience.
So when people say, I saw them and they haven't taken care of them because they're dead, we're all going to say, oh no, they're going to mist
And the birds,
and the birds. And well, that's one of the big things because it's food, really.
and its habitat. I mean, if all this stuff is up in the winter, there's going to be places for all these sort of little creatures, not large things, so small you can't even see them.
Oh,
Not
we do it.
raccoons or anything. But
Few mice.
it's
We have had people actually complain that the gardens look unkempt. So I was interested in your remarks about, I mean, we didn't know we were investing in something different and wonderful. So it's been, we have to formulate how to respond to that. Exactly.
Well, and that is one reason for the yew hedges and the lawn pieces, because it is kind of a fact that people like a bit of order with their wildness. And I think, you can't even see the yews now, but when those are very clipped and formal looking, and this lawn is here and these steps, I hope that will
It does
temper
bring order
people's
to some of the
feelings.
chaos. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Control
the
chaos.
sidewalks are very structured. So, yeah, we're hoping that it will help people get their minds around this.
I think more of this type of activity that people are walking
Through.
provides that. So now I'm going to be looking forward to seeing it in the.
Yeah, you'll have to come back.
I do. Well, that's the other thing. I think people that drive by the street, they have a very different experience than people that actually have the pleasure of walking through it. Because you have to walk through it to really experience how great it is.
And I think that when the grasses become more uniform and orderly, I think you're going to get a little bit more of that idea that the chaos is encased in
Yeah.
frames.
I don't think it looks that chaotic. I
Yes.
guess
No, I don't
that-
look like a
It
meadow.
doesn't bother. Well, you know what my
Well, I
dog
meant
looks like,
chaos
so-
in a good way.
That is chaos.
Well, that's what I tried to say when we started. It's not people's conventional garden. They're coming to these places, they're looking at manicured lawns, cliff hedges, and straight rows of trees. this
And that's
is
what we
something-
had, and we hated it. It made the building so formal. And this is artistic. It's creating effect.
So that's all we had. We hope these help. There will be signs. The hillside that we can't see. That is really a stabilization, but again, using native plants and again, it's that idea of pooling the woodland that we created on the other side of the parking lot and started here around the building. So that'll get denser and more wooded like. We use trees that'll get big enough to hide the houses. It's going to take some time, but it'll.
How good that house
So that'll eventually be part of the more traditional. Trying to thank you all.
glad we were able